Okay. Okay, my friends. Good morning, everybody. Wait a second. Are we connected? Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. As we learn our Tanya of the day. Well, not Tanya of the day, Tanya that we learn every week. We are holding on the 53rd chapter of Tanya, which is the last chapter in the first part of Tanya, the 53 chapters of Tanya. We're holding on the last chapter of Tanya. The last chapter of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe comes to answer a question which he started in the 51st chapter of Tanya. In the 51st chapter of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe asked a question that it says, we all know that God fills the world. He's in all the worlds. God's above time and space, and therefore he's Ein Sof. He's infinite. And then the Torah says that God comes down into the Beit HaMikdash, into the holy temple. Everything is divine providence, because today in Chitas, as we start the portion of Truma, we have the very famous statement. Portion of Truma deals with the building of the temple in the desert, and God says, "Va'asu li migdash v'shachanti b'seicham," that you should make for me a tabernacle, and I shall dwell in it, or in their midst. That means that the Eibishter God says that even though as kol haaretz ani amale, I fill the entire world, but since everything comes down, everything in this world comes down from the upper worlds. So the Alter Rebbe goes into the explanation of how the upper worlds work according to Kabbalah, the four worlds, and that ultimately everything in the world comes from the upper worlds, is like a mirror from the upper worlds, and therefore it all depends on the way this world is a vessel for the revelation of the upper worlds, of the spirituality of the upper worlds, which makes this world itself different, which in essence makes a difference in this world. So this world has many different levels, and therefore the holiest place, the holiest country in the world, the Torah says the holiest country in the world is Eretz Yisrael, is the land of Israel, is the holiest country in the world. Eini Hashem Elokecha Tamid Ba. The verse says that in the land of Israel, the eyes of God are upon it. From the beginning of the year till the end of the year, God's eyes are upon it. Whatever that means, it means that there's a special connection, there's a special relationship between spirituality and Eretz Yisrael. In the land of Israel, the law says that the city that's surrounded by a wall has a certain kind of a holiness different than the rest of the land of Israel itself. Connected that to the holiday of Purim, which is coming up. And in those cities that have surrounded worlds, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, which is also a surrounded city, a wall that until today there's a wall that surrounds the city of Yerushalayim, or Jerusalem, is the holiest of those cities. So that's why it's called Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is one of the cities that's called the holy city in the Torah. In Yerushalayim itself, the Har HaBayis, the Temple Mount, is holier than the rest of the city. In the Temple Mount itself, the Azara, the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, is the holiest part of that mountain. And I'm going to share with you these pictures. So I'll give you a little bit of a background. So maybe a picture will give us more pictures, say more than words. And this is a temple. This is the Beis HaMikdash. So you have the Temple Mount surrounded by walls. You see this wall over here. I'm pointing to the wall over here. This wall, actually over here, is the Western Wall. So this surrounds a Temple Mount. The wall that you go to the Western Wall today is not the wall of the Beit HaMikdash, but the wall that surrounds the mountain. And this is called the wall. This is the Har HaBayis, this whole temple complex. And then you have the Hazara, which is holier, Ezrat Nashim. And then you have the Hazara over here, which is holier, goes up holier. And that's why there are steps that go holier and holier. And this is the Beis HaMikdash itself, which is holier than the previous parts. And then you have this is in the Beit HaMikdash, in that building. This is what's called in the Torah Kodesh. It's a holy room. Only Kohanim can come into this room. Over here was the menorah, as you see. Over there was the Lechem Apanim, which we're going to learn in this week's portion. The showbreads. And it was the Mizbeach Hazav, the altar, the golden altar with the Ketoret, where the incense was burnt. So that was the holy. And then we went even holier. Which was the Holy of Holies. There was a curtain divided the holy from the Holy of Holies, which this was the Holy of Holies, where the ark was situated. The golden ark with the cherubim. And the most important thing in this ark was the Ten Commandments, that God gave on Mount Sinai, and the Ten Commandments was in this ark. Now, in this place, in this what was called Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKadoshim, only the Kohen Gadol went into, and only once a year, and that was on Yom Kippur. And this is something that it looked like the Kohen Gadol coming into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur with the Ketoret, with the incense. And that's the only day he went into the Holy of Holies. In this picture, you see that there are three things over here. And this is also was in the Holy of Holies. There was the Mata Aaron, the stick of Aaron that blossomed after the whole situation with Korach, the Torah says, was put in the Holy of Holies. There was a bottle of oil that anointed the vessels, and there was this thing of it, Tzinsenes Hamon. There was a jar of the man that was always in the Holy of Holies. The man that came down from heaven was also in the jar of this man, was put into the Holy of Holies. Now, in this place of the Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kohen Gadol went into only once a year, and that was Yom Kippur. And it was it was the holiest place, but it was a very frightening place, because it was a place that either you came out alive or you did not. And that's why Yom Kippur, in the day of Yom Kippur, when we do the holiday Yom Kippur, it says it was a great celebration in the Jewish nation that the Kohen Gadol survived the day. And we know in the second temple that there were many, many Kohanim, hundreds. Every year they had to change the Kohen Gadol because he would die in the Holy of Holies. Every year on Yom Kippur. And it came to a situation that they used to have to tie a rope to the bottom of his leg to pull him out of the Holy of Holies because he would die there. Now, the difference between the first temple and the second temple was that in the first temple, there was this Aron, there was this ark there. The second temple, the ark was not there, because before the destruction of the first temple, the king, Yoash, I think, Yehu, I'm not sure exactly which king, he hid, it says in the prophets that he hid the ark. Because it's brought down that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, who was a great prophet besides a great king, he knew that there's going to come a day, there's going to come a time there's going to be destruction of the temple. and the Goyim, the nations, the Romans at that time, the Babylonians, would want to take this ark. So he put a place in the stomach of this mountain, and he created a room that was symbolic, almost the same as the temple above. And he made sure that they would be able to put it in this place, hide it in the belly of the mountain. They would put this ark there. So according to tradition, the ark of the temple is still there. It's in the mountain, and it's in the stomach of this mountain. Therefore, the mountain continues to stay in its holiness until today. So ultimately, God revealed himself in this room, in what's called Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. So, the Alter Rebbe, as he just saw, this is what the pasuk says in this week's portion. The first tabernacle that was built in the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, built a tabernacle. That's this week's parsha, which was the same thing that King Solomon and King David built, but they built it out of stone, and ultimately stood for 400 years and was destroyed by the Babylonians. 70 years later, Ezra came up with the Jews and built a second temple, and it was stood for 420 years, and it was ultimately destroyed by the Romans. And we've been in exile for over 2,000 years, and we pray every day, 3 times a day, for the rebuilding of this Beis Hamikdash, for the rebuilding of this temple. That we're going to rebuild the temple, the same place where it was built by King Solomon and by Ezra. We know the exact dimensions, and we know the exact way it was built, because you can learn it in the Rambam, Maimonides, who explains exactly how the temple was built and what exactly every vessel was. And it's all based on this week's portions, the portion of Truma, and next week Tetzaveh and Vayakal and Pekudei, which talks about exactly the architectural dimensions of this temple, especially the vessels, which even though the physical temple was different in Jerusalem, the way it was in the desert, but the vessels were exactly the same, meaning the Aron was exactly the same, and the Shulchanot, the bread, the table of showbreads was exactly the same, the menorah was exactly the same, the Mizbeach Hazav, the altar of gold, was exactly the same. So here the Alter Rebbe says, in essence, that everything that I've explained in chapter 51 and chapter 52, that everything that happens in the upper worlds happens ultimately in this physical world. That means that we had just explained last week and weeks before that there are 4 spiritual worlds. Even the lowest spiritual world, which is the world of actions, called Asiya, is ultimately not this world, it's a spiritual world. So that world shines itself in this world. That means in this world, there is all these 10 manifestations, means which these 10 manifestations from Chachma, from wisdom, until Malchus, until the way it comes down into the lowest manifestation, Malchus, was kingship, which we explained. That Chachma, wisdom, is Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies of every world is Chachma, is wisdom. So too, the Holy of Holies of this world is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, is the Holy, is in the Beis Hamikdash, that room, the Holy of Holies. The question is, where's the Holy of Holies today that we don't have a Beis Hamikdash? And we don't have this Holy of Holy room. Where is the Holy of Holies today? And the Alter Rebbe is going to answer, where is the Holy of Holies today? But first, the Alter Rebbe explains the way ultimately the Eibishter wanted that there will be a revelation of God in this world. Not only a revelation of God, the Shekhinah, where God comes in the world in a natural way, which that's the Sfiras HaMalchus, that the way God comes in the world in a very natural kind of a way, but also the way God comes in the world in a supernatural way. Kodesh HaKadoshim. The way God is in this physical world in a very physical way, but at the same time, a supernatural existence. So we have in life, you have nature, you have a miracle, which is supernatural. Miracle. But a miracle usually does not stay forever. A miracle happens, let's say the crossing of the sea, which is an unbelievable miracle. We celebrate it every day by saying Oz Yasher, by singing the song of the crossing of the sea. But then the water went back. The water did not stay split until today. The water split. And as the Torah said, after a certain amount of time, the water went back to its normal state. So the miracle happened, but it went back. That means, because God said that nature needs to be nature. Water needs to flow. And that's the way I created the water in a natural way. And therefore, if I'll make a miracle and I'll split water, it'll be for a time. The miracle will not stay forever. The water needs to return. So too, any miracles that happen in life, usually, it's for a time. And then life goes on. Then it goes back to its natural state. So too, when we talk about general all miracles that happen, like if we want to pick another miracle, stopping of the sun, Moshe Rabbeinu stopped the sun. Didn't stop the sun forever. Yeshua stopped the sun. Shemesh begivom dov. Yeshua stopped the sun to conquer the Gibeonites. It happened for a certain period of time. And then the sun continued on its journey the way God put the sun to surround the world. And so on and so forth. We have to have in the world something where God comes into the world and it stays in existence, this miracle, forever. Where do we have in the world something that transforms the world? That in this world we have a miraculous situation that changed the physical, not for a moment, not for a time, but it's still there today. And that's the Aron. That is the Aron. The Aron that in this Aron that God asked the Jewish people to build in the desert, today in the Chitas, that God asked to build an Aron, build an ark. And in this Aron, you're going to put the Luchot, you're going to put the 10 Commandments that were written by God himself, that the Talmud said had unbelievable miracles. That you had, for example, the letter Samach that was in this rock. That the letter Samach was the Samach is a full circle. That means you had it hollowed out a circle, and there was something in the middle. There was a piece of stone in the middle that hung there a whole time. Miraculously hung there a whole time, and it's still there. This letter Samach that is carved out, a total circle, is hanging there till today. Or that the luchos were read on both sides, and you read it equally the same way. That's not possible in a physical world. That's a total spiritual concept. And that was in the physical stone. So there's something in this world today that we can see, and it's there, a miraculous situation that transformed the world and changed the makeup of the world in the way it is in a natural state, the world today. And that's why we pray for the building of the Beis Hamikdash speedily in our days, so that would be able to be not something that is hidden in a mountain, but to be able to be part of the Jewish nation. Va'asu li Mikdash, as God says, Va'asu li Mikdash v'shachanti b'soichem. That's why if you look today in the portion the first thing God asked the Jews to make in this Beis HaMikdash, even before the building, even before the making of this tabernacle, the first thing he asked them to build is the Aron, because that was the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That was the center point of this whole tabernacle. That was the center point of this Beis HaMikdash. And that was truly the center point of the whole world. Because that revealed God in a physical world. You had the connection of the supernatural and the natural in a way that you saw it begashmis in a physical way. Still doesn't answer the question. What do I do today? And we'll see how the Alter Rebbe answers. What is today the Holy of Holies? And let's learn the Tanya. Let us learn the Tanya itself. Okay? But that is basically what we're going to learn today. It's a fascinating chapter of Tanya. I don't know, try to get through the whole Tanya. It's going to be difficulty because the Alter Rebbe goes to the first temple and the second temple, the difference between the first temple and the second temple, that it was different physically because everything that's there physically is different spiritually. So let us learn the Tanya of the day. And not today, Tanya that we're holding by. I'm sorry, keep on saying Tanya today. Let us learn the Tanya that we're holding by, chapter 53 in Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe explained this concept. So the Alter Rebbe says as follows. If you can see it, follow with me in the Tanya. The time of the first temple stood that at that time there was the Aron, the ark, and the luchos and the tabernacle. I mean not tabernacle, and the luchos, the tablets, the base, kochim in the Holy of Holies. What happened at that time? Hayashchina. So the Shechina, the presence of God, Shehi Malchus Datzilus, which is the kingship of the world of Atzilus. Again, Malchus is the way it comes into a physical thing. We explained many times. Malchus is the kingship, is the way everything spiritual comes into its next dimension. So Malchus Dasia, Malchus, the kingship of the world of creation, comes into creation. That's the way it comes into creation. That's why today in the Tanya it says the word in the Torah. It says the v'shachanti, I will rest in your v'shchina, the shchina. Shchina is the way the presence of God rests in the world. That's why the Mishkan is called Mishkan, the tabernacle. In the desert is called a Mishkan, because Mishkan comes from the same word, Shechina, which is the presence of God. Shehi bechinas gilu eirin seperchu, meaning that it's the revealed light of God. Shayrasham, because it rests there in the Holy of Holies. Umislabeshes baseres adibros, and it's enclosed in the 10 commandments, which are engraved upon the tablets found in the Ark of the Holy of Holies. For the 10 commandments, the 10 commandments in general, because there's 630 commandments. Why are there only 10 commandments? When you ask a Jew today, well, how many commandments are there? They say 10 commandments. There's no 10 commandments. There's 613 commandments. So why do we see 10 commandments? Because the 10 commandments is what God said on Mount Sinai, right? And our sages tell us these 10 commandments have within it all 613 commandments. These are general commandments. The truth is, the first 2 commandments, I am God your God, has within it all the 248 positive commandments. And you shall not have any other gods is really the source of all negative commandments. You should know that if you sit down today and you'll count the 10 and you'll take the 10 commandments, that's in the portion of Yisrael, you'll count up its letters, it's going to come up to 620. The 620 letters in the 10 commandments. What is that symbolic to? The 613 commandments of the Torah and the 7 commandments of the rabbis, like Hanukkah, like Purim. Purim is commanded by the rabbis, the 7 commandments, the 7 laws that the rabbis made it as if a Torah commandment, and that's why we say a blessing on Purim, and we say a blessing on the menorah of Hanukkah, even though it's a rabbinical commandment. So we have 620 letters in the 10 commandments, which is symbolic to the 620 commandments of the Torah. 613 in the Torah and the 7 rabbinical commandments. 7 commandments, which is also interesting that this number 620 is the word kesed. Alter Rebbe is going to bring it down right now in Tanya. Kesed. The word crown, kesed, has 3 letters. Chaf, Saf, Reish. The letter Chaf is 20. The letter Saf is 400. The letter Reish is 200. Is 620. Kesed, the crown of God, the will of a God, which is Kesed in Kabbalah, the crown is higher than Chachma in many ways, is the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The will of God is his 620 commandments. So that means that these 10 commandments really have within it all the commandments. They are general commandments. And they hold within it everything. They hold within it everything. Our Gemara, the Gemara says that the first word in the 10 commandments is Anoichi. Anoichi, which is mentioned in the Gemara. It's a Mitzri, it's an Egyptian word. Anoichi. Anoichi means I in Egypt. Really, in Hebrew, it's Ani, but it says the word Anoichi, and the Talmud says that Anoichi, the word Anoichi has 4 letters: Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud. Anoichi. Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud. What do they stand for? It's the acronym for 4 words: Ana, I; Nafshi, my soul; Ksavis, I have written; Yahavis, I have given. God says, you want to find the essence of me? You're in search of me? You can find it in the Torah. You don't have to go far. You don't have to go. You don't have to change anything. I've written and I've given it in the Torah. So in a way, God says within these 10 commandments, you have the entire Torah. You have everything you need, spiritually, physically, everything you need, you're searching for, is in the 10 commandments. It's really in the Anoichi, is in the I. That there's only one I in the world. You see, in America, the I is always put as a big letter, right? I. But there's only one I. And that is Anoichi. I am God, your God. Einoi Mavade. There's nothing but God in the world. That's why the Gemara says, Bachavakuk, the Talmud says, came a prophet and said the whole Torah you can put the whole Torah on one concept. If you really want to put the whole Torah on one concept, I can give you the whole Torah on one word, and that is God. From the beginning to the end, stands on one concept, and that's God. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu said. Ein oid mavadei. If you want to understand the Torah, you need humility. Ein oid mavadei. There's nothing in the world but God. That is the entire Torah. If you comprehend that, you'll have an easy time in the rest of the book. If you comprehend that there's only God, and everything is God, and everything starts with God, and everything ends with God, and everything is about God, then the rest of the Torah is simple. The second you think that there's something else besides God, you got a problem. That's when problems start. That's when you have issues. So that's why it's interesting. The Torah starts off with the letter Beis. Bereshis bara Elokim. The Ten Commandments starts off with the letter Aleph. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the letter Aleph. And the Talmud says the Aleph stands for, you look in the Torah, the letter Aleph is big. The Aleph stands for Alufei Sheloilam, stands for God. So therefore, Aleph is God. The Torah, the Ten Commandments, is all about God. Starts with God and ends with God. So therefore, that's why in this Ten Commandments, you have the entire Torah. That's why it's important that everybody should know the Ten Commandments. Not only they should know the Ten Commandments in simple form, but they should know the Ten Commandments in all its dimensions, in all its concepts, because you understand the Ten Commandments. Truth is, you understand the first commandment. I am God, your God. You'll basically be on the right road. The rest of it will be easier. So therefore, now going back to the Alter Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe says, you have to realize, in the Holy of Holies was this ark. In this ark was the Ten Commandments. In the Ten Commandments was where God resided. He had the Ten Commandments were written by God himself. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu, the first tablets, Moshe Rabbeinu came up and God gave him the Ten Commandments. He broke those tablets. Even the second tablets, when he carved out, he didn't carve out the writing of the Ten Commandments. He carved out the box, the stone box. And then even the second tablets were written by God himself. So you had in that Ten Commandments, in that tablets, which was in the Holy of Holies. That's why, again, that place is a very spiritual place. But you had to be a very spiritual person to go in. A regular Jew was not allowed in the Holy of Holies. Even a Kohen was not allowed in the Holy of Holies. The only one who was allowed in the Holy of Holies was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and only on Yom Kippur. And when he went into the Holy of Holies, he better make sure to be ready and prepared to go into that room. Because he might have got in, but he might have not got out. And the Rebbe explains, actually, that there were Kohanim that wanted to have this honor. They knew that they're putting themselves into a pearl situation, a dangerous situation, but they had this want to become like the sons of Aaron, that they wanted to have. They paid money to be able to go into the Holy of Holies, even though they knew that they might not get out. And the Gemara says that the second temple stood for 420 years, and I believe there was over 300 Kehanim Gedolim in those 400 years. That means most of the Kehanim Gedolim passed away. There was one that was there for 40 years. It was a miracle that he was a Shimon Tzaddik, I believe. No, he was part of the first temple. Take that back. So there was another Kohen Gadol that was there for many years. That no, I think it was Shimon Tzaddik. That was there for like 40 years, and that means that there was. You take the number; it was a very small number of years. That there was over 300 Kehanim Gedolim. That means they died every year in the temple, on Yom Kippur, and there was a 50% chance they knew they were going to die. And maybe if they knew who they really were and they were not so perfect, they knew the Messiah was going to die in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. So it was a very holy place, but because it was a very holy place, a very, very, very scary place for a human being to go into. So a regular Jew, if you think about it, the regular Jew is not allowed into the Beis HaMikdash in general. A regular Jew was not allowed in the Beis HaMikdash. Even a Levi was not allowed in the Beis HaMikdash. Only Kehanim were allowed into the temple. Most Jews were out in the courtyard of the temple. And if they went into the temple, God forbid, it was the opposite of life for them too. So it was a dangerous place. The holy place was dangerous for a regular Jew. It doesn't make a difference how holy he was. He was a great person. He was not allowed in the Beis Hamikdash, and he shouldn't have gone to the Beis Hamikdash. That's why till today, for a regular Jew to go on the Temple Mount is a problem in Jewish law, because you have to be pure. And if you're not pure in Torah law, you weren't allowed in the Temple Mount. It was the opposite also. The Torah says if you went to the Temple Mount, you were impure. It was the opposite of life. Because over there was revealed godliness. We have to realize, and that godliness has not left the Temple Mount. That's why we continue to pray towards Yerushalayim, wherever we are in the world. And the holy place today, the holiest place today to daven is at the Kotel HaMaravi, the Western Wall, where all prayers of all Jewish people go through that place from around the world, and especially if you're there itself. So that's why so therefore dwells, going back to the Alter Rebbe, but now we understand the concept of the Beis Hamikdash and why it's important to learn about the Beis Hamikdash, even till today. Because in the Alter Rebbe says, if you understand this, that means that in the temple was revealed godliness higher than even in the worlds, the upper worlds. Because there was a penetration within the natural world, that the natural world changed. In this world, that shows greater revelation of godliness even in the upper worlds. Because the upper worlds can only reveal godliness in its spirituality, cannot reveal its godliness in its physicality. Over here, God revealed himself in a physical world. So that's why the godliness was present, much more powerful in the physical world than even in the spiritual world. For the Ten Commandments are all embracing principle of the entire Torah. The nafka migoy chachmila, which arise from the level of the supernal chachma, the chachma of Atzilus. That means the chachma, the wisdom of Atzilus, is revealed in this 10 Commandments. That is far higher than the world of manifestation, the world of Atzilus, the chachma of the world of Atzilus. The holy of holy in the world of Atzilus is revealed in these 10 Commandments. And in these 10 Commandments that are carved out on this physical stones. In order to engrave them on material tablets of stone, which they were, you need to jump. God needed to make a jump. Like God jumped over the Jews in Egypt. God made a leap. He went straight from the highest worlds to the lowest worlds. It was total jump from Chachma of the world of Atzilus, from the world of emanation, till this stone, to this physical stone. That's why it says, Anoichi, I have, Anod Nafshi, my essence, Ksavis, I have written. It didn't come through a normal state of events. It jumped the entire system. Kabbalah says it jumped the entire system. God jumped straight from his essence to the stone. And here he revealed himself and he wrote in a stone, in a physical stone. So here it did not descend degree by degree, parallel in order to descend in this world, which descends by stages from the higher world to the lower world, until it reaches this material world. That's the normal, the way it goes, that it'll be able to come in material world. Then you have, as I mentioned, a ness where God makes a jump too. That's a miracle. God, so to say, makes a ness, a miracle. So, example, the miracle of Purim happened totally within nature. Right? The miracle of Purim is a great thing that happened totally in nature. Take the miracle of Hanukkah. It happened, the oil lasted 8 days. A ness. It didn't last 9 days. It didn't last 20 days. It lasted 8 days. The miracle lasted for 8 days. And that's what we celebrate, the 8 days of Hanukkah. Imagine it lasted a month. We would celebrate Hanukkah for a month. We'll have to have a menorah for 30 minutes, 30 candles. It lasted 8 days. The miracle lasted for a certain amount of time. It was a ness. How does a candle, how does an oil that should last 1 day last for 8 days? It's a miraculous thing. It's supernatural. But it lasted 8 days. Here, that shows you that the godliness came into a miraculous situation, but it didn't change the nature totally. The nature went back to nature. Here, God jumped the normal. Total. The supernatural jumped and stayed supernatural, which is something that's totally jumps the normal process of creation and of the way God comes into the world, even in a miraculous way. As the Alter Rebbe says, because you have to realize, when God created nature, when God created nature, God works through nature. And the Eibishter, even if he does a miracle, he'll usually use out nature. Right? So even the crossing of the sea, why couldn't God have him jump over the sea? You want to do a miracle, the whole nation jumps over the sea. That would be phenomenal. That would be an unbelievable miracle. Right? The whole nation goes in a cloud and crosses the sea. No, God didn't do that. He split the sea. God usually does miracles through nature. That's the way it is. Because the Eibishter does not change nature, usually. So as I said, we're coming to Purim. The holiday of Purim was a miracle that happened within nature. The Eibishter made a natural thing. It's almost like a love story. The king lost his wife and he fell in love with a Jewish girl. Why? There was millions of girls out there. You had to fall. Well, that's the way it is. God made a miracle. But you can say she was the most beautiful girl that was there. She was the most charming that was there, and he just fell in love with her. You cannot ask a question on love. But you have to be able to realize that a Jew has to realize that it doesn't make any sense. And it has to be a miracle. But it didn't change the natural form of the world. Because that's the way the Eibishter made the world. The Eibishter wants to work through nature. And a Jew has to see a miracle within nature. That's why a Jew should realize that we can see is also a miracle. He can walk, it's a miracle. He can talk, it's a miracle. These are all natural things. But nature is also a miracle. It's also a miraculous thing. Usually we don't realize the miracle of nature till we get sick, God forbid. And then we realize, wow, these simple things that we do is a miracle. Just unbelievable. But the Eibishter works through nature. That's the way God made the world. While the tablets were physical things, but they were the writing of God. And the writing of God is the writing of God. What does that mean? Beyond the nature of this material world, which is derived from the radiance of the Shekhinah in the shrine of the Holy of Holy in the Asiyah, which is the light of vitality issued in the world of Asiyah, in which this physical world is also included. The Eibishter penetrated all the worlds till he came down into the world of Asiyah, and he then came down into the world of action, and then he came down to these tablets. Let's finish the word of the Alter Rebbe, and then maybe we'll understand it. But the level of spiritual chachma of the world of Atzilus, which is the first world, which consists the totality of the Torah, and it's encapsulated in the 10 Commandments, enclosed itself in the Malchus of Atzilus of Bria alone. And it did not clothe itself further in the lower words. And they alone, Chochma Vatzilas, as is grabbed in Malchus Vatzilas, and Malchus the Bria without further vestments, until as they are in the infinite light of the the infinite light of God that is within them. and they are called Shechina, Hashayda B'Koche Koche B'Eis Rishon, that rest in the Holy of Holy, the first temple. When they invested themselves in the Yud HaDibris and the Ten Commandments, which were engraved by miraculous means in a tablet, which are resting in this ark. Moreover, the Ten Commandments upon the tablets were working with the work of a living God. Who are Alma Discassia. This being the terms of the spheres, the Bina of Atzilus, which is known as the concealed world, which nests in the world of Bria, as known by the students of Kabbalah. So that's why the Alter Rebbe says these tablets had within it miraculous situation that they stood, as I said, they stood, the letter Samach stood with its own ear, so to say. The Samach, which is a circle, stood its own ear. Also, we know that this ark itself had a dimension, but had no dimension. And what does that mean? That means that the ark, we know the Torah says the ark was 2.5 cubits in its length. 2.5 cubits. 2.5 cubits is around 2.5 feet. A little bit more, 3 or 4 feet. It depends how much a cubit in the Torah is. 18 inches or 12 inches or 24 inches. Depends how much a cubit. Not sure exactly how much a cubit is. So if it's 18 inches to 2.5 cubits is 36, 40, 45 inches. It's 45 inches in its length. Around, let's say take a middle number. 45 inches in its length, like close to 4 feet, something like that, in its length, to the box length, and the Holy of Holies in the let's take the Mishkan itself. The Holy of Holies was 20 feet, 20 feet in its length, in its width. It was 20 feet. So if you put the ark in middle, if you would put the ark in middle of the Holy of Holies, and the Holy of Holies is 20 feet. The Gemara says you only should be able, if you put it right in the middle, if it's 20 feet, you should have on each side, you should have something like, let's say it's 4, let's give a number, 4 feet. You should have 18 on you should have, if it's 20 feet, let's say if it's 20 feet, you should have 8 on this side and 8 on this side. If you measure from both sides of the ark, you should have 8 on this side and 8 on this side. And the 4 in the middle, that's the ark itself. But there was a miracle in the temple that when you measured from both sides, you got 10 feet. Talmud said that means the ark took space, but didn't take any space. Hard for a human being to comprehend. The ark took space, but didn't take space at the same time. Miracle within nature. It's like the burning bush. It burnt, but it didn't consume. It burnt, but it didn't consume. The Rebbe explains the miracle of Hanukkah was the same thing. The menorah, the oil burnt, but it didn't consume. That was the miracle of Hanukkah. Because the Gemara asked the question, what was the miracle of Hanukkah? What happened every night? Did the oil burn out and refill? And there's a whole argument to what happened exactly all the 8 nights of Hanukkah. Some hold that the menorah burned out and every night it was filled up by itself. Some hold that the vessel of oil filled up every night and never emptied. There's a whole argument in the Talmud. The Rebbe says, Al Pi Chassidus, the miracle of the menorah was that it burnt, but it didn't burn. The oil burnt, but it didn't consume. The sneh, the burning bush burnt, but it didn't consume. The Holy of Holies had a space, but it didn't have a space. That's what's called the revelation of God in the world. in a way that we can comprehend. It was there, but it was not there. It took up space, but it didn't take space. That's the revelation of God in a spiritual way. In the most physical, spiritual way that can be in this world. That's what happened in the first temple. That was the revelation of God in the first temple. That's why it's a total jump from the Alter Rebbe said v'kochi kochim, the Holy of Holies, in the world of Atzilus. It totally moved quickly to the world of Asiya, ultimately in this world. V'shachanti b'seicham. God says, I dwell in the Beit HaMikdash, but not only do I dwell, you want to find the place where I dwell in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy of Holies. Not only do I dwell in the Holy of Holies, but I actually dwell in this Aron. In this ark I dwell. And I talk between Mibein Shnei Keruvim, I speak between the two cherubim from this tablets that were in the ark. Because over there, why you have all this? Because why do we? It's like very not understandable if you don't learn Chassidus. You don't learn Chassidut. It's very hard to understand what that means. What does that mean? That God talks between the two cherubim from the tablets. But if you learn Chassidut, if you learn this, and you understand what the Alter Rebbe is telling us, you understand what that means. Because that is a revelation of Odin, just like God reveals himself in Chachma, God reveals himself in wisdom. Kulam b'Chachma Sisa, the Holy of Holies of every world, explained in the chapter 51 and 52 of Tanya. The Holy of Holies of every world is Chachma. Where is Chachma in this world revealed? In the tablets. That's where wisdom is revealed. Chachma is Kayachma, we explained. It's something that is in wisdom is something that's worldly but higher than world. That's why what is it? Potential. Where is this revealed in this world? In these tablets. In these tablets. What happens in the second temple? That's a problem. There was no ark there. And when we'll understand what happened in the second temple, maybe we'll understand what is happening right now. When not only we don't have an ark, and we don't have a Beit HaMikdash even. The second temple, there was no ark, but there was a temple. There was a Holy of Holies. The Kohen Gadol still went into the Holy of Holies without the ark. Today you don't have a Holy of Holies. Today you don't have a temple. You don't have anything. What do we have today? So we need to
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
And in the second temple, when there was no ark, did they still go in and if they weren't worthy, die?
Yeah. Most of the Kohanim, as I said, most of the Kohen Gadol died in the second temple. There was no ark.
Oh, thank you.
So they still died, even though there was no ark, because it was still the Holy of Holies. As I said, Shlomo Melech built right underneath the Holy of Holies in the belly of this mountain. He built a place for the ark. So the ark was still there in a lower chamber. So they went into the Holy of Holies. There was no ark there, but it was still the Holy of Holies. And that's why they still was a dangerous place to go into. Let's look at the words of the Alter Rebbe. By Yesheni, in the second temple, in which the ark and the tablets were not there. These being among the 5 things that the Gemara said, there were 5 things that didn't happen in the second temple that happened in the first temple. That means it was less spirituality. So actually the second temple stood longer. The second temple was bigger physically. The second temple had many physical dimensions. Ultimately, Herod built a temple double the size, the whole courtyard. He made the temple more glorious physically than even King Solomon. But it didn't have the Holy of Holies. I mean, it had the Holy of Holies, didn't have the ark. And there were other miracles that did not happen in the second temple that happened in the first temple. Because it was less spiritual. There was missing a dimension of spirituality in the second temple. But that was the problem. The Shekhinah did not rest in it. This means not only that God forbid the Shekhinah did not abide there at all, right? It speaks of the category of the Shekhinah which was used in the first temple. This revelation of God that was in the first temple that we just mentioned, that was a revelation of God within the world in a physical way, was missing. There was a revelation of godliness in other ways. Sacrifice was always accepted, etc., etc. Many miracles happened in the second temple, but it was not the same level. It was greater. It was greater than the revelation. Chassidus explains that in the first temple was greater revelation of God, less revelation of humans. The second temple is a greater revelation of human, the service of Yidden, which much more on a higher level. But the revelation of God was missing. That's why the service of the third temple will be both dimensions. It'll be the revelation of God, and it'll be the revelation of humans. And that's why it says it'll be nitzchias. It'll be everlasting. The first was not everlasting. It stood for 400 years because the revelation of God, much more greater revelation of God, was missing the human dimension. The second temple was the human dimension, was missing the godly dimension, therefore also didn't last forever. It lasted 420 years. The third temple, the Mit Shem, will be both the revelation of God and the revelation of human capabilities, and therefore it's going to be an everlasting revelation. It will be an everlasting temple. So that's why, let's go back to the Tanya. It was not the same category as the first temple, which was not in the manner of the ordinary descent of the world. Bias at Shina, that's a difference. So the bias edition, the first temple, was supernatural. It was God revealing himself. Supernatural. Supernatural. God revealed himself not through the normal ways. And that's why the Aron was there. There was 5 miracles that the Gemara says every day you came to the temple, your mama saw Gililakos. Your mama saw a revelation of God. It's put on Picky Office. You walked down, the smoke went up to heaven on a constant basis. Nobody smelt nothing negative in the temple. There was unbelievable miracles that happened every day in the Beis Hamikdash. The difference was in the second temple, the Bayis Sheni was a regular, unbelievable building, unbelievable edifice, but it was human nature. It was back into the natural phenomena, and that's why the Aron was not there, because the Aron is symbolic of supernatural, natural, and they couldn't be there at that time, because the revelation of God was not there at that time. So, but the Sepata is abided according to the original gradual descent of Malchus Atzilus, vested itself in Malchus Bria, and latter Malchus and Tzid's normal way, the way God comes into the world. From the world of Atzilus comes into the world of Bria, and the world of Bria comes into the world of Yetzirah, and the world of Yetzirah comes.
Now he's gone.
Oh, I froze for a second. And Yitzira came into the Holy of Holies in the world of Asiya. The Koche Kochim and the world of Asiya, the Holy of Holies, came into the world of the Koche Kochim Beis Hamikdash Lamata. V'shar Shabbat Shechina. The Shechina presented itself in the Holy of Holies. Therefore, the Kohen Gadol, see, you can still in the second temple, only the Kohen Gadol went into the Holy of Holies, only once a year. Therefore, not every Jew can go into the Holy of Holies. Even in the second temple. Besides the Kohen Gadol in the Yom Kippur.
Rabbi, I have another question. How in the second temple were the human dimensions more? In what fashion?
They built it. They were much more religious in the second temple than the first temple. It was their service, since there was not the Gila Shechina, the revelation of God the Jews needed to do on their own. They needed basically to do the work on their own. It was much more their service, like today. much more our service. Because when you don't have spiritual revelation, it's ultimately you do things because you want to do it, not because of the revelation. And therefore, even in the second temple, they had to, that's why it started off the temple in a very, didn't have no money, the Jews in the beginning of the second temple, everything was made in a very much more, I want to use the word cheaper way. Everything was made in the lack of gold and lack of all these grandeur. It took many years for the Jews ultimately to rebuild the second temple the way it should have been built. And ultimately, it was only built in its glory until Herod came. At the end, the last 100 years or 80 years of the second temple, then you had its glory of the second temple. For the first few hundred years, it was a great struggle for the Jews in the second temple. And they not only was a great struggle for them, it was a great struggle for them throughout the years because they were not under total full rulership in Israel. So there was like this struggle even with the dominating factors, the Babylonians and ultimately the Romans, etc., etc. So the second temple was not totally under Jewish rule like the first temple was. And therefore it was a Jewish struggle. It was a Jewish struggle. And that's why those holidays of Hanukkah and Purim are all in the second temple, because it was under those kind of struggles that the Jewish people went through.
Thank you so much.
Where do you have the God today? That's our question. What happens today? So we've gone from level to level. We've gone, if you wanted to know Jewish history, starting from this week's portion, we've gone from Moshe Rabbeinu building a tabernacle. Moshe Rabbeinu himself building a tabernacle. He built this tabernacle. Actually, the Gemara says this tabernacle that Moshe Rabbeinu built is still around. We don't know where it is, but this tabernacle was never destroyed. Because what Moshe Rabbeinu did was never destroyed. So this tabernacle is someplace, hidden someplace. So we then went to the tabernacle being, ultimately built in Israel. They hid the tabernacle of Moses. They built in Shiloh. They built a stone building ultimately. Over there was a stone building, was covered with curtains. There was not a roof or a regular roof. It was the curtains that were in the Mishkan covered that building. Ultimately, that was destroyed. And Shlomo HaMelech, David HaMelech built the Beis Hamikdash. King David gathered all the products. King Solomon built the temple. It was destroyed 400 years later by the Babylonians. Ezra, as I said, came and built the second 70 years later. The king of Persia allowed, that's the story of Hanukkah, story of Purim. The king of Persia allowed the Jews to build the second temple. Ezra came back with not all the Jews from Babylon, that was Persia then, and the Jews came back and built the second temple. As I said, they struggled. The second temple had a lot of its struggles and a lot of its problems because the Jews had semi-power in the land of Israel. Hanukkah happened, and the Greeks and everything, whatever. There was tzaras throughout its history. And ultimately, the Romans came and destroyed the second temple. So right now we're after the Romans. We're in the Galus of Edom, the Galus of Rome. This is the fourth Galus. This is the last Galus, the Galus of Rome. And we're still in that Galus. It's the longest Galus in history. It's over already 2,000 years that we are in this Galus of Rome. What do we do today? Where is Chachma Datzilus? Where is the Kachim Kachim of the day? And therefore the Gemara says, Mishechara Beis Hamikdash. From the time that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Ein leHakadosh Baruch Hu be'olamei daled amesh alalacha. The Holy One, blessed be He, is found in the 4 cubits of halacha alone. Chachma Datzilus comes in to the Chachma of this world. And what's the Chachma of this world? Jewish law, halacha. Torah, you see, Torah is a shrine of a Holy of Holies that connects God with the world, is so that halacha, the illumination of the Shekhinah, which is the Kodesh, meaning separated and a part of the world, should become a baruch, the Hebrew word meaning for draw down into this world, comes into halacha, Jewish law. Therefore it says, if one Jew sits and learns Torah, and it says in the Gemara in Pirkei Avos, Shechina imay, the presence of God is with him. The presence of God. God is with him. That is in this pasuk I mentioned, started this class off. The verse of the Torah. The Torah says, "Va'asu li migdash v'shachanti b'seicham." When God told Moses to build a tabernacle, he said, "Make for me a migdash, so I will dwell in your midst." What's fascinating is it says b'seicham, in their midst. It doesn't say b'seichai, in it. It says in their midst. And the Gemara says, b'seich kol echad v'echad. I will dwell, if a Jew will make a mishkan in this world, I will dwell in your midst. I will dwell within you. And the Gemara says, what is the mishkan that a Jew builds in his little world? That's the Aron. That's the ark. That's the Torah that he learns. That's the halacha that he does. I dwell in the Torah that you learn. I dwell in the mitzvah, the halacha that you do. That's where I dwell. Ana, as I said before, Ana nafshi ksavis yohavis. I have written, and I my soul, I have written, and I have given it to you. You want to find my essence? You want to find my holy of holies? Open up a Chumash. Open up a Gemara. Open up a book of halacha. Learn Tanya today. There, you're going to find my essence. You want to find my essence? Is in a simple law of Torah. Simple law of Torah. Kederech Estalsus Tapus, in the order of gradual descent and investment of Malchus of Atzilus, in Malchus of Bria, Yitzir Asiya, comes down into this world. Kirtayag Mitzvahs HaTorah, for the 613 commandments of the Torah, Ruban Kinkulam, are by large precepts which involve action. And if they don't involve action, they surely involve speech, like the Torah. You should read the Torah with your mouth. Ub'machshava, or like even with your thought. Talmud Torah, like the learning of Torah, Birchas Hamazon, and the blessings after meals, or Krishma, saying the Shema, or saying the prayer. That even if you're going to say it in your thought, we all know that there's been a general rule: meditation is not valid, is not validity of speech. You don't accomplish learning Torah with thought. You don't accomplish davening with thought. You don't pray with thought. You don't accomplish blessings with thoughts. You have to say the bracha with your mouth. You have to say the prayer with your mouth. You have to learn the Torah with your mouth. The Kabbalah in Jewish law, it's been accepted. The Akima Svasav have a Maisa. That the Akima Svasav, the moving of your mouth, is an action in Jewish law. That's why you have to keep the words of your mouth. If you say you're going to do something, you have to do it, even though I just said it. You have to do it because your words are an action in Jewish law. So therefore, you should realize learning Torah, you're doing an action. V'tayag mitzvah Torah, and the 613 commandments of the Torah, together with the 7 commandments of the rabbis. V'gamatya keser, which is, as a numerical equivalent to word keter, chaf, taf, reish, which is 620. Shurutzena elyon baruch hu, which is the will of God. Keser is will, crowd is will. Hamaluvish b'chachmasa is baruch, which is enclosed in the wisdom of God, which the wisdom of God, Hamyochedes b'ered sei baruch hu, which is unified, united with the blessed, infinite aspect of God, which is in a perfect union. Try to finish this chapter. And God founded the earth with wisdom. This refers to the oral law that is derived from the supernal wisdom, as it's written in the Zohar. For the father, Chachma, beget the daughter, which is Malchus, feminine. So the father, Chachma, beget Malchus, which is the oral tradition. The written law is the masculine part of the law. The oral law is the feminine part of the law. Chachma is the wisdom, the highest level is masculine. Shechina is feminine. Feminine is that concept of femininity. So you bring down these two concepts, the oral law and the written law, come together as one, the masculine and the feminine. That's why the Malchus, which is the highest Sphira, comes down into the lowest Sphira of Malchus. They unite as one. Masculine and feminine come together as one. This is what they mentioned in the Yunka in the Zohar. The Neheri law delek alesha, which means that he, the supernal light that is kindled on the Jewish head, namely the Shechina, requires oil. So you have the connection between the Chachma, which is the masculine, comes down into the feminine, needs to have oil, needs to have this is connecting to Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. The candle of God is the wick of the Ner Hashem. The candle of God is the soul of man. So the soul is the fire, is connected to the body, which is the wick, needs to have oil. That's the Torah. Torah is the oil that keeps the soul of God, the spirituality and the physicality united as one. Pirush, Slavish, Bechah. Maybe we should do this next week. Maybe we stop over here and we'll come back to this next week. I think so, because we're past our time. So maybe we'll stop over here. We'll finish chapter 53 next week. We'll complete the chapter 53, because I really want to go into this concept. It's a very beautiful concept. It's a concept on its own. So let's complete. I think we should complete it this week. The learning of Tanya. We'll continue Mitzvah, the ending of the chapter 53 in Tanya in Mitzvah next week. It's a beautiful concept we just learned. It's fascinating, truly a fascinating concept we just learned in Tanya. Wow, which the Alter Rebbe explains that we need to bring God into the world, just like they brought God into the world in the first Beis Hamikdash. They brought God into the world into the second Beis Hamikdash. We, by learning Torah and by doing mitzvahs, bring God into the world at this present time. But as the Alter Rebbe says, we bring God into the world in its normal descent, as it was in the second temple. It's in its normal descent, even in a lower way. We pray for the building of the third Beis Hamikdash, which will again in Mirsham see the way God comes into the world, not in its normal descent, but in a miraculous way, we'll see the revelation of God. Not that we're looking for miracles. We are looking for a connection between God and this world in its most pristine way, where the world stays the world and God reveals himself at the same time in the world as it stays a world. The difference between the first temple and the third temple is, again, it says the difference between the first temple and the third temple is that the first temple was not everlasting. The third temple will be everlasting. Why? My thought. Because the first temple was a revelation from God and without human intervention totally, while the third temple will be the unity of man and God. So therefore, since man and God will be united, that man will be able to have this revelation in the time of the Messianic time and the coming of Mashiach, where man and God will be united as one, and therefore, not to do, as the Rambam writes, Olam kiminhagei noig. Mashiach's going to come and the world will continue. God will not change nature. Nature will continue the way it was, the way God created the world. So the world is going to continue. The only difference is there'll be the capability of the revelation of God in the world as the world continues in its normal way. But the world will change because the world will be ready for this change, for this revelation of God. So that's why it says, Mashiach comes, there will be no hate, there'll be no war, there'll be regular human beings. And the nations of the world will be here also. Everything will be here. But there won't be no hate, there won't be no strife, there won't be no wars. The world will realize its purpose. The world, the Jewish world will realize its purpose, will fulfill its purpose. The world will realize its purpose and fulfill its purpose and will be in this world, but in a pristine way, in a godly way, because everybody will fulfill their purpose, what God brought them to the world for, and there'll be unity and harmony and love and compassion and everything that you can imagine in a pristine way. In the building of the Beis Hamikdash, the building of the third temple, which will be symbolic, not only to the Jewish people, but to the entire world. Symbolic, the concept of spirituality and physicality coming together as one in a unified way. And let us hope we merit to that. We merit to that concept speedily in our days.
Amen.
Beautiful, happy. I invite you all again to come on Chitas, Parshas Truma, the building of the Mishnah.
Rabbi.
Today, we'll continue tomorrow at 8 a.m. Have a beautiful and godly day.
Rabbi, I have one more question.
Yes.
Okay, does the world have to have all this